Welcome, guys. David Feldman-Makrias here, and today what we're going to talk about is really just going back to the basics, some Google Ads mastery, but the fundamentals, specifically going through negative keywords and how to add them. So the process hasn't changed a whole lot over the years, but the way to think about it across the campaigns, I think, makes a big difference. We'll take some notes on this. I'm going to go through a live version and actually go through a couple things on how you can actually add negative keywords, what the context is, so on and so forth. So let's get started right away. But one thing I want to note that's changed about negative keywords in Google Ads, specifically in 2020, when I looked up, does the search terms report show all search terms? Okay, this is how we're going to add negative keywords. We're going to go to the search terms report. So if you're not familiar with where that is, I'll show that in a second. But basically, the search terms report shows all of the actual live searches that your keywords or your shopping ads or whatever it is on the search network, your ads actually showed up for, were clicked on, so on and so forth. But there's a big difference because in 2020, is this the right one? No, when I first looked this up, it said the search term report is a list of search terms a significant number of people have used and that resulted in your ad being shown. That's from Google. But Google Ads search term report shows all search terms that triggered an ad. However, in September 2020, Google Ads changed their reporting practices to only show search terms that reach a volume threshold. This change was made for privacy reasons. This means that you don't get every single search term inside your search terms report anymore. You only get the top ones, which is okay. There's nothing we can really do about it. I still think the search term report is one of the best reports you can use in Google Ads, but it is worthy to note that we no longer get all of the searches anymore, and we haven't for the past few years. You're only getting the top volume of searches. So with that, let's actually go into a live example and how I actually delineate searches in search terms and utilizing that to include negative keywords. All right, cool. We're back to my negative data set. Not negative data set. We're back to the search term set. I am showing for this account, I am showing at least one keyword. Don't want to get into a bunch of results and things like that, but let's actually take a look and see what's going on. So the one keyword that I'm looking at is going to be cheese making ingredients, right? And you need some context for cheese making ingredients because there's two different match types that we're using, and that generates different types of actual search terms. But you want to make sure how closely the search term is related to your keyword. So I have the list of some search terms here. This one is one at the top, citric acid for cheese making ingredients. So, that's an iffy one, actually. Right at the top, has a good amount of impressions, but that's an iffy one because if I'm specifically looking for that search cheese making ingredients, then maybe citric acid, that is one ingredient. But if I'm only looking for the broad term, like a general term, that might not be something I wanted to include, but I'm going to leave it for now. One thing to note, this campaign is very it's very isolated, and it's going to show the most relevant searches as possible. So the next one here, best rennet for mozzarella cheese. That's still related to cheese making ingredients because rennet actually is an ingredient. And then we get to some of the pretty good ones here. We get to cheese ingredient list, cheese ingredient list, cheese making essentials, cheese making ingredient, cheese making materials, cheese making supplies. Like all of these searches are very, very relevant to this actual keyword, which makes sense for a few different reasons. One, I'm using exact match. Exact match, even though Google has gone really broad as of late, exact match still yield a very, very significant search. This only used to yield cheese making ingredients in the past, but now it's all different. That's one thing to note. It's supposed to be close variants, but I mean ingredients of cheese making ingredients, yeah, I could see that. But cheese making supplies cheese, I don't know. Is that really a close variant? Cheese ingredient list, that's not as close of a variant. It's like Google has broadened its exact match scope because it's saying, okay, we have AI and smart bidding and all this stuff. Let us do what we need to do. We're going to show up for it. The exact match doesn't mean as exact as it used to mean. But other than that, I mean, these are pretty clean, right? These are pretty clean. Notice that the brackets or the exact match is going to yield a much closer result to the actual keyword than my parentheses or phrase match. That's why this citric acid is in this search term, but it's not even in this keyword at all. That's because phrase match is going to go a little bit broader than exact match. Now, this was a campaign that was pretty dialed in. Now I'm going to show you a campaign. It's actually a branding campaign. I'm going to get rid of some of the keywords and stuff here to protect the client in question. But I want to show you kind of what shows up on a more broad spectrum and how I would add that as a negative keyword. Okay, cool. So now we're looking at a different campaign. This is a broad match campaign, and I have a lot of things blurred here because I want to keep the privacy of the client, but some things I'm going to show you are a little bit different. Note that the match type here is going to be broad match. So we're experimenting with broad matches. That's what Google is pushing right now. The one thing to note about broad match keywords, though, you're going to spend more money in anything broad match because you're allowing Google to have a bigger net to go fishing on searches, which could be good but could be bad. I always like the reverse engineering funnel, meaning you start with like the lowest hanging fruit possible. My computer's gonna die, so let's get this done. You start with the lowest hanging fruit possible, and then when you saturate that, you work yourself up. So the problem with starting broad match again right away would be, all right, well, broad match is, I think, a strategy that you use when exact and phrase are already covered, or the saturation is already covered with the lowest hanging fruit possible. Then we can go to, the middle of the tree, the higher up on the tree, so on and so forth. So what I wanted to show you, my date range, I have it blurred out, but it's a significant amount of time. I'm only looking at 30 searches here as well. I could look at a lot more, but I wanted to show you, I mean, most of this broad match campaign, which is geared towards the brand, is actually pretty good. Um, and that's why a lot of these searches are actually blurred out because that's the brand name itself. There's a few that squeak past, though. There's a few that squeak past, like liquid rennet and rennet cheese. I don't necessarily want to buy those searches in this campaign because I want to buy them in a different campaign, right? If I'm supposed or if I'm going to go for those products. Again, these three sneak past you a little bit. And it may not seem like much out of 30, but you do this over a significant amount of time, you'll start to buy searches that really aren't related, and you want to keep a fine-tuned list. So let's say I wanted to negate these, right? So there's a couple different ways to negate, and that's what I wanted to go over now. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to look at this best cheese making books. Books is irrelevant, right? Um, it's not relevant for the actual client. It's not relevant for the campaign. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add this as a negative. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit the checkbox, and then I'm going to add as a negative keyword here. So I made my face bigger because I want to cover some stuff because my Loom Blur tool doesn't work totally correctly. So here's our negative keyword, right? So I have a couple different ways to add it. I can do it at the ad group level, the campaign level, or the negative keyword list level. So actually, what I look for right away is I look for a general word inside a negative keyword that I know I don't want to show up for. That's the first thing I look for in a search term report when I'm negating keywords and adding them in. Well, what's the one term in here that I don't want to have? It's books in this instance. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, instead of just adding this negative keyword as an exact match, I'm actually going to take off best cheese making. And now I have books. So here's the interesting thing though, too. I have brackets around this, meaning I don't want to show up for anything books related. So anybody that searches books, you know, I'm not going to show an ad for. Okay, cool. That's great. But is this the best way to add the negative keyword? I don't think so. The reason why is because, yeah, I won't show up for anybody searching very, very close to books, but maybe I'll show up for other searches that have other relevancy in books in it. That could happen, especially as Google is going more broad. So typically, what I like to do is I'll find that one term that I know I don't really want to show up anywhere, and then I'm going to actually go through this and I'm going to take the brackets off. I'm going to do that because the brackets are not really necessary to get to broad match. Keywords and match types work the same as negative keywords and match types. So now I'm adding this negative keyword as a broad negative keyword, meaning anything related to books, not just someone searching for books exactly or something very similar. I am not going to show up for, and that's what I want to do. So now, again, I could add it to the ad group level. I could add it to the campaign level, or I could add it to the negative keyword list level. It really depends on how you want to structure things. If you really want to buy clean, right? What I've done, and I could show this in another video if you guys are interested, is I set up a negative keyword list for each one of our campaigns, meaning they're the keywords of all the search campaigns, and I have them as negative keyword lists. And what I do is I apply those negative keyword lists to each other campaign. Meaning, if I had a campaign for, I'm just throwing it out there, red crayons and yellow crayons and blue crayons, well, on the red crayons campaign, I'm going to negate the word blue in yellow. And then in the blue crayons campaign, I'm going to negate the words red and yellow. And then in the yellow crayons campaign, I'm going to negate the words red and blue. So I don't want to show up for red and blue. I just want to buy super, super clean. So that's one way to get really efficient. That's using negative keyword lists, and you can build it over time. You can also add it to the campaign level, which is, again, it depends on how you set up your campaigns, but that is a good way to do it too. And you can add it to the ad group level. The benefit of adding it to the campaign level is it's going to just make sure that any ad group in your campaign doesn't show up for that. And if you make sure your campaigns are organized by search term and what you're trying to accomplish, that's a good way to add it as well. The ad group level, I pretty much don't use that. I don't really use. I usually use one of these two because I like to be super organized and methodical in how I set up search campaigns and how I organize campaigns as well. But just note that you can do it at those levels. What I would recommend if you're just getting started is I would just set up one master negative keyword list that basically has a bunch of keywords that you don't want to show up for ever, that are completely unrelated to everything in your business, similar to how books in this instance we do not want to show up for. And then what I would do is just compile that list, right? Start from there. So then you could start from that. And then as you get fine tuned with how you operate and how you organize campaigns, then you could start to make more comprehensive negative keyword lists like I mentioned previously. All right. So that's negative keywords in a nutshell, at least for search campaigns. Shopping campaigns are pretty similar. It's a little bit different though, because they don't necessarily have keywords. It's all based on shopping title, product detail page, so on and so forth. But I can create something if this was valuable for you guys to go over that. I hope you enjoyed and take care.